Bob. Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. For a roll call to meet everybody. On my left is Emmanuel Daskalakis, then Mike King, Mike Baptiste, George Barrett serving as chair, Ken Buckland, our planner, and Richard Swenson, our associate member. First item of the agenda is the meeting minutes of August 12th. We've got a chance to review. Do you have a separate copy to sign? Or
Right here.
do you just, oh. Continue.
No. Grady is here to
Oh.
represent.
So moved. Good.
I move to approve the minutes of August 12th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next is a continued public hearing for coastal cultivars definitive subdivision. Same one. Couple.
Yeah, smaller one, but got it. Thank you.
All set?
You want a big
Floor
one,
is
Emmanuel, or
yours.
you want a small one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Grady with GAF Engineering. Since the last meeting, I've had an on-site meeting with Mr. Rowley, and we have revised the plans based on that meeting and based on his comments. I believe you have a letter in front of you that he is satisfied with the revised plan that we have. We are showing modifications to the existing cul-de-sac to be made once the new cul-de-sac is completed. I've met with the McCarthys, and they're on board, and they have no issues with changing the cul-de-sac. I have met with several of the unit owners on the other side, and they're discussing it. I have heard nothing back from them, because there are several unit owners, so getting them all together and having conversations and to make a decision. So they are familiar with what we're proposing, but they have not given me direction in either way, whether they're opposed or accept the island, the extension of the island as we show on the plan. If you're familiar with that side, we're just proposing to extend the island to a certain point, which will still allow them access to the back for trucks, has the proper radiuses, and won't interrupt that function.
And for the record, member Mark Bianco has joined us. Thanks, Mark.
So this is,
Questions?
A comment that in addition to the report from Charlie Rowley on the findings, we have a memo from the Board of Health with no comment regarding the subdivision.
I don't seem to have Charlie's response. Thanks.
Yes, that's it.
Charlie, you have any additional comments?
No. Ask a question regarding the covenant versus performance bond.
Actually, I really haven't discussed that with them yet.
A future action then.
Did you see the letter you wrote?
Just want to send an email?
Recommendation for approval.
Do you have any proposed,
No.
Gonna stop hanging out at other meetings, I guess. This is a public hearing, if there's anyone here that would like to comment on this project. Seeing none, any questions, concerns from the board?
I'm not sure I understand the status of the waivers. Charlie, in your letter, I understood from your letter that the waivers, if any, are applying solely to this immediate area that is being considered, and does not transfer to the rest of the site. Is that correct?
No, the only thing that's before you is the subdivision or the layout of the street itself.
Right.
Nothing to do with the site.
I'm sorry, can you hear now? I can. Thank you. Sorry, the light's on.
Were there any questions?
I don't see any in the documentation.
So it would appear that after the site visit and all the comments and feedback from the town engineer, the GAF and the client have complied with every one of them. And I'm not seeing any reason why we can't move forward here.
I do
Are
have,
waivers requested?
I'm sorry?
Are there waivers requested, or?
Yes, no sidewalks, street trees, and a street light.
I just,
Top corner of sheet 1.
on the full? Oh, okay. I couldn't find them.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Is this the first, the proposed facility that will go here in the future? Will that be the first of its type for coastal cultivators? Or does one exist somewhere else?
No, they have other facilities. I don't know if they're operating any in Massachusetts right now, but this will not be their first facility, no.
Are you familiar with those other facilities? A similar type of plot size?
I don't have the details on their other operations, but they are familiar, and this won't be their first use.
And do any exist in Massachusetts right now? Any cultivating facilities like this?
Yes.
Where are they?
On the Berkshires, there's an outdoor grow facility, actually, that was just recently permitted. Was it Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard just approved a dispensary, and they can't fly it or ferry it, so they have to grow it on the island.
Yeah, I think that one out in the Berkshires just going through final approval. I actually heard that on the radio coming back here this morning. I'm just curious if we're have enough foresight on what the end use of the property is going to be to make decisions on the subdivision proposal.
Well, that's all that's before you tonight is the subdivision and the subdivision roadway. If there's site plan to be done at the time of construction, that'll be,
Yes, we will be following it up with the site plan, and all the details and questions can be addressed at that time.
George, entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
I would.
Second?
A motion's been made by Mike Baptiste and seconded by Mike King to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
What's your pleasure, George?
I would imagine we'd have to make reference to the waivers requested and a determination on the,
Don't have one you can keep, but I
Plant.
can print another one at home.
the street lights and street trees. I believe that's consistent with the rest of Patterson Brook Road as well as the sidewalks.
Yeah, there's no sidewalks out there. Charlie and I discussed that through the site plan process, there'll be a landscaping requirement and there'll be a lighting requirement for that, which should be satisfactory. There was some recommendations in Charlie's last letter as to how the stormwater management plan should be handled, and
My recommendation was just to incorporate reference to it in your approval, and that the only stormwater that should go into the system, the way it's designed, is from the roadway itself and the area that surrounds it that was shown in the drainage calculations. Any future site development should have stormwater facilities of its own.
I don't know if you... Well, this is site development, but... Is it a 21-day period? I'll do the subdivision. This is site development. See. Yeah, this is...
Is it Form C1?
pretty much the same. see. Our standard conditions, reference the appeal period and the filing with the town clerk. They reference the rules and regulations regarding the subdivision of land and the water management and maintenance plan. Final approval, the developer will work with the town engineer and municipal maintenance to compile a list of inspections. All rubbish, rubble, metal stumps, and other debris removed and properly disposed of off-site, as well as providing a porta potty, no work hours, Sunday and legal holidays, and no work prior to 7 a.m. or after 5. Site will not be clear-cut. Applicant is asked to waive the street lighting requirement.
Street trees and sidewalks.
It was just the condition regarding the streetlights. Approvals and conditions from all other applicable town departments, boards, commissions, and state agencies will be part of these conditions. And the applicant is responsible for all fees. Also reference that, while the stormwater operation and maintenance plan is incorporated in the conditions, stormwater shown on the plan is intended to control the runoff from those areas shown on the plan as contributory areas. Future site drainage shall be independent of Patterson Brook Road and its extension. And I would imagine that the board would allow the waivers. If you'd like to do that with a separate motion, that's fine.
So you need a motion to grant the waivers? So I make a motion to grant the waivers as noted. Streetlights, street trees, and sidewalks for the Coastal Cultivars Definitive Subdivision Plan, map 89, lot 1007 and 1005.
Second.
Motion was made by Mike King, seconded by Emmanuel, to grant the waivers listed. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And any further motions? I would say a motion to accept, to endorse the plan drawn July 3rd, 2019, revised through August 22nd, 2019, with the conditions mentioned.
Good motion, George.
Motion made by Mike Baptiste,
Second.
seconded by Mike King. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That's one, okay.
Signatures on the front.
So moved. Which one you want back? All?
Came in after the agenda.
all set.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Next item of business is the public hearing on the proposed articles for town meeting.
I put the articles on slides, make it easier for review for everybody in the audience and on the board. So I'll take them as you wish.
Whatever order your slides are on.
All right, minimum landscape buffer. This was identified by the Zoning Board of Appeals. They noted that the separation between office and industrial and the other uses was inconsistent in the in table 1042. So what you'll see on the graphic on the slide is the proposed number and the previous number in brackets. So the separation, see if I can get this arrow to work. So the separation between a single family and office is 20 feet, just as it is elsewhere in the table as at 20 feet. So it mirrors the distances that are shown between each use. Any questions?
Well, the changing to the lower number, is it arbitrary or what's it based? Why not increase the distance?
That's your other option, is to increase these distances to match this one. But I think that is a less efficient use of land when you have larger setbacks.
Specifically between office and residential. Maybe between industrial and commercial and so on, it's not as critical, but between single family and two family and commercial. I'd rather see more space, but again, the numbers are arbitrary, so.
I think that, Emmanuel, if you look at a single-family home right here, and you carry that over to industrial, it calls for a 40-foot. But however, if you look at the chart, you can do it this way and go from industrial to single-family, it calls for 50 feet.
No, I'm aware of that, but
So-
I'm looking now at,
I mean, so they're inconsistent.
I understand that.
So he just went to the smaller one?
No, I'm saying, why not look at the larger one?
Is that what you're proposing?
I'm asking why not?
Why not? Because that's less efficient use of the land. And we only have so much industrial and commercial land for our tax base.
I think one of the inequities that came up in the past is if you had a commercial use next to a single-family home, say a gas station, you only needed a 20-foot buffer. But if you had an office, which comparatively would be a lot quieter, you had to have a 40-foot buffer. So that's the issue that's come up in the past, you know. It just didn't seem to make any sense that you had to meet that hurdle.
Is there any difference in meaning between a dwelling and a house or a home?
No, there isn't.
We probably should, just if we're correcting the table, correct the nomenclature so it's consistent. I don't know if a multifamily dwelling, that couldn't be a nursing home or retirement community.
You
of some
have,
sort,
you
could
have
it?
home, house, and dwelling, all using the,
Yeah, so I would just take advantage of, what are we looking at here? You're saying there's no difference, right? It couldn't be argued legally that,
I would use the term dwelling for all of those identifiers. Single-family dwelling, two-family dwelling, multifamily dwelling.
right, and then you have commercial use and you have commercial. And is office clear enough defined as you're stating, Mr. Chairman, that office is a quiet zone? Is there any other use of an office? I mean, could a physical therapist be considered an office, or would that be considered commercial or medical? Where does that fall?
That's a service business. That would fit under office or commercial.
So it's office or service?
A service use being a commercial use.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is a service industry a commercial use or an office use? I guess it wouldn't really matter based on the table, but I'm just thinking of this being a devil's advocate here in a legal challenge.
Could be both.
Service could
Yeah,
fit in
it-
both,
yeah.
in which the setbacks would be the same, right? Those columns are identical.
That's correct, they're identical.
Well, they would be with proposed change, they'd be identical.
And if you had an agricultural activity, an agricultural service, what would it go under?
It kind of depends.
It wouldn't have a-
It could be a commercial use with an office. I think they've always taken the position that the predominant use, if the office is ancillary to the commercial use, then it's commercial. If it's an office space, then it's an office. I would think a medical office would be viewed as an office, including physical therapy and,
Dentist.
yeah, dentist.
What do you do with like a contractor's bay where it's office in front and
I think
commercial,
it's-
industrial in
I
back?
think they would take the position it's a commercial use, they would take the highest, or the most,
Prominent, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's right. This is even more confusing.
what's the word?
I wanna bring
The
it
most intrusive use, I guess? Is that
just another
The most intensive use.
intent?
office as opposed to office having its own.
Ken, in the upper left-hand corner of that chart where it says adjacent use with house underneath it, what's the purpose of the word house at that location?
I'm not sure, Charlie.
Doesn't seem to go with anything.
No, it doesn't.
Could that be stricken?
I think that's appropriate.
Can I just,
So we take out the house here.
By saying adjacent use, does that mean non-conforming if a residential is in a commercial zone?
No, this doesn't identify whether it's non-conforming or not, it's just a proposed use against an existing adjacent use. And and it's the landscape buffer that's between the uses as well, too. This is not a setback, this is actually a landscape buffer.
so in the zoning bylaws, dwelling, you're correct, Ken, seems to be the dominant word here. But under commercial, banks, offices, retail businesses, service establishments, service-related shopping, motor vehicle service, motor vehicle sales, filling stations, dry cleaning establishments, conference centers, motels, hotels, bed and breakfast, guest houses, neighborhood grocery stores, wholesale, restaurants, drive-in, through establishments, commercial, recreational facilities, adult use, and outdoor advertising. All that's under commercial.
Including office.
Right.
So the chart does, it does line up. It is a little confusing in that commercial is commercial, but then there's a separate call-out for office.
Why, but it seems like we shouldn't even have a column there for office, because office is considered commercial.
And it makes sense to realign the numbers, though. I mean, everything you just read off is the most intrusive use, and yet it has the lowest buffer already.
You notice they're all the same, too.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a total duplication.
yeah, so, yeah, I think it's just, again, just consistency. Commercial, office fits under commercial, but office also consists of medical services, so could you put an ambulance company next to a multi-family home or a single-family home?
You could if the zoning would allow it. And then the buffer that gets created between them is based on this standard. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the setback, of course, again, it's just the landscape buffer.
What is the asterisk? Why? How does that come into play?
In that you would only have that option to control the setbacks with the subdivision. But because approval not required is A&R is only endorsement of the division of the lot, you can't force zoning on an A&R subdivision except for frontage.
And I just, it's just,
It doesn't,
somebody comes in and puts a subdivision in next to your office, you have to go plant 20 feet of trees, or is that?
if this is landscaping a requirement, it doesn't apply to subdivisions, does it?
And under zoning,
We've never controlled landscaping on a single-family house lot within a subdivision. It applies to building setbacks, but with respect to single-family homes, this is with respect mostly to other types of uses. I don't see how it applies to a subdivision requiring a new road. That doesn't make any sense. As Ken says, this is simply landscaping, and that comes under the zoning bylaw. So if you're going for site plan review, landscaping setbacks need to be shown. But I don't remember the last time I've seen a site plan for a single-family house. They just don't exist. And that's why it says none and none against single-family and two-family. So I think that note is really not, it doesn't seem to me to be appropriate, because you're not talking about subdivision. This is chapter 40A, not 41.
So-
I assume that note is in the existing.
yes, it's in the existing.
So the bold is the suggested, right, reduction?
That's right,
Change.
and the bracketed numbers are the existing numbers.
So under commercial office being the same, essentially, you could have a office next to a industrial junkyard or salvage yard, and we're gonna reduce the landscaping buffer between those two characters?
That's correct.
Don't forget it's a minimum though, Mark. Doesn't mean that under certain circumstances you couldn't require a larger one.
But in the case of the chart, as long as they're following it, why would it get pushed to us or to the appeals board?
It isn't necessarily to the appeals board. This is a minimum. So if it comes to site plan review, I believe that under site plan review, under certain circumstances, you have the authority to require a larger buffer. In your example, especially if it was a junkyard against some other type of a use.
Mm-hmm.
So let's summarize. We're correcting errors in the existing chart, and when there's a discrepancy, we're correcting to the smaller number, typically from 50 to 40, 40 to 20. The commercial office and industrial matrix is all being put at 10. Mark does have a good point, though, that the office category is a subset of the commercial category. And if you look at the proposed chart, office and commercial are the same. So in order to make this chart line up better with the chart in the bylaws and the definitions under section 3, it would make sense to remove the office row and column altogether, in my opinion.
Well, but I also think it doesn't align because it doesn't talk about marinas, utilities, agriculture, so it doesn't do a direct correlation with the items in each category. So we're creating a gray area when we don't need to, if we just elaborate on the identical categories.
So we started out here with a simple problem that we have an error in the charts and we're trying to fix it. And we're getting quite expansive into this, much more than what the original intent was.
Yeah, I don't think there's any need to strike the office. I mean, we don't want any misinterpretations of either category, so I think, you could, if you struck that, then, and went strictly by the commercial use, you could end up with, oh, you can't do that because it's got an office in it, or vice versa, so.
So for this town meeting, I think we need to move forward and correct the errors and get that done. And we brought up some good points that we could talk about and debate and discuss for future changes. But for this article, the errors need to be corrected, and I think we should do that and move forward.
Yeah, there's really no reason to complicate it. Yes, sir.
Just a point of order, it's a public hearing, but I don't believe you folks actually moved and opened the hearing by way of a motion. So I don't want somebody at town meeting standing up and saying, Madam Moderator, I don't think they opened their public hearing, and she's sitting right here and has to say, yeah, I think you're right, the articles are valid, so.
Yeah, we don't generally make a motion, but I do normally read the advertisement into the record. I was remiss in waiving that. Where is that anyway? Do you have an advertisement? Give me a dirty look, Ken.
I was checking with my admin. I don't have the announcement here.
I think you can cure it just by having a motion, a second, and a roll call vote, and you're good.
I don't hear anybody doing that, so. Someone care to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to open the public hearing regarding the landscape buffers.
I would just say for all of the articles, and you don't have to keep
Okay.
going.
All the articles
Like the mo-
listed for town meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to open up public hearing regarding all the articles to be presented at town meeting.
Second.
Motion made by Mark, seconded by Mike King. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Go ahead, Ken. Anything more?
Anything more on this?
Well, is it understood that you will strike the sentence at the bottom, the note, sentence?
Yes, strike the note at the bottom.
And house disappears under adjacent
It
use?
becomes dwelling, and it becomes adjacent use.
And remove the
This
asterisk
is
too.
a public Go ahead.
Remove the asterisk too.
That's what Emmanuel said.
This is a public hearing. If there's anyone here who would like to comment on this article? Seeing no one. I think we already put our recommendations in, or no?
No, you have not put your recommendations in as yet. You could continue till,
Who's sponsoring this one, Ken? Is the planning board sponsoring this?
planning board would be sponsoring it, yes.
What's your thoughts on it, gentlemen?
I think it makes sense.
Is that a recommendation for favorable action?
Mr. Chairman, the only one I'm concerned with is industrial against office commercial, and reducing that, just because the uses that can be in commercial office. I realize these are the minimums, but if they come in front of us and they want to have a junkyard or salvage yard, we're going to increase the buffer requirement?
I mean, I don't know how to comment on hypotheticals, but
Yeah,
But we have-
we can do that at the time when they come for a site plan.
Okay, they can't argue back against the chart saying, I only need to go to the minimum.
well, right now, if you chose to do what they could do 20 feet.
They could choose to do 20 feet, but if we said push it to 40 feet, because we don't like the adjacent uses, are we reducing it to 10 feet and they're gonna hold us to 10 feet?
Well, the junkyard is 20 feet. If the office was proposing to go in next to one, I think for their own good, they would choose to go with a larger buffer.
No, if we follow the bottom line industrial over and go with the recommended reduction down to 10 feet. So the junkyard is under industrial category and an office building is gonna go right next to it at 10 feet away on the buffer.
If it was in the industrial zone, yes, it could.
I share your concern, Mark.
To me, it's more difficult to become more restrictive than to say, we don't feel that you need a 40-foot buffer. We have the discretion to lessen that requirement, but
So what proposal are you making?
my concern is just on the bottom line, where on the commercial column, bottom 40, reduction down to 10.
What do you want to change it to?
Well, my opinion is it should stay at 40, because if you align the uses under industrial and office, you could have that scenario. You could have a salvage yard next to a dentist office. And only a 10-foot buffer in between.
So are you making a motion to change industrial office buffer sizes to 40 as opposed to the proposal here?
But that
Should
would,
let it remain at 40.
If you look at it from industrial office in the far right column, it's only at 20. That's one of the errors. If you, industrial to office is 20 here and 40 here, going office industrial, right?
And now go industrial to,
Yeah, it's 40 on one, and 20 on the other.
right. So I'm suggesting where we're dropping those 20 down to 10, they should go up to 40.
Is that a motion?
Now, again, we're talking in the industrial zone, so we're not talking,
Nothing says whether it's in the industrial zone or not. It's just that industrial use.
that's, you assume that's where the industrial use would be.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I mean, was Tremont now an industrial use? It's now light manufacturing in there.
That was a special zone. It wasn't necessarily an industrial or a commercial zone. It's a mixed-use zoning district.
So what's the question? I mean, we're stuck here. What are we doing?
Well, if you feel that, what's the board's feeling on the industrial to office?
I think 10 is too short, too small.
I'm happy with 10.
Okay.
I agree with Emmanuel. I mean, are we putting it to, we're trying to move towards a vote right now, so I think we have a bit of a split here.
10 feet is from here to where the table is, Ken's table. What are you going to do? One tree? There's no, what are we trying to accomplish? Some aesthetic or just satisfy written words? I think 10 is not enough. 20, I could see. Doesn't have to go to 40.
Michael and Michael, how do you feel? Would 20 be a good compromise?
That'll work.
That's fine.
So I would make the motion then that the office and industrial buffers be changed from what's proposed on the screen then to 20 feet both ways.
I'll second that.
Well, that essentially remains the same then, except
Motion
the
made
bottom
by
line, right?
Richard, seconded by Emmanuel, to have the office and industrial landscape buffers be raised from 10, well, to 20. So you can see the inconsistency that existed before, so change both of those to 20 feet. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And a motion on the recommendation for town meeting?
I make a motion to submit the changes to 1042 landscape buffer as agreed.
Recommend favorable action?
I do.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mike King, seconded by Mike Baptiste. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Next up.
Next up, the original notice and the public notice said add towing and car wash to motor vehicle service. But in review of the definition of motor vehicle service, it includes washing. So the only addition, the only change under this scenario is, this recommended, is to add towing.
I think our issue with this was the storage of towed vehicles.
Well, I think the conversation was, is the towing gonna be a service for the service industry, or is it gonna be a towing for picking up wrecks, police tows and everything else? Then you get the storage problem then. We don't want that to happen.
Right, so just, the car lot just tows the car there to be repaired and sent on its way, as
For
opposed
their own
to...
business, not to pick up cars broken down or smashed up or whatever.
Right.
Then I would suggest you say, and towing for service.
Well, or service is too general. What does service mean? So you're saying change that to for, towing for service, and we're eliminating the
Towing.
category of service only. See, I look at that last word of service, saying, hey, my motor vehicle service is putting in car radios. And I fit into that definition.
It also is somewhat of a circular argument or definition, saying the definition of service is service.
What were you trying to accomplish by putting the "and" in there?
And that the last phrase is towing for service at the site. So, and towing for service.
As a definition, I suppose it works. I think well, the use chart could be adapted a little bit as to where it's allowed, but I think as a definition, which is all we're changing here. Would say, yes, sir. Could you? Sure. Just come forward and identify yourself, please.
My name is Chris Conti. I live at 2614 Cranberry Highway. I'd like to talk about the towing. Towing is really an act of moving, transporting, or hauling. It really involves the actual use of moving cars just on the property. So I would say, like somebody doing motor service and they picking up their own vehicles back and forth and not operating a tow business, that might be allowed. Lot for stowing towed vehicles is storing a vehicle on a property and charging for the storage. I believe that's a totally different use. Charging for storage, and actually a minimum, if any, motor service will be performed on these vehicles that have been towed. Under Mass General Laws, Title 22, Chapter 159B, Section 6B, it states a storage facility wants to charge a maximum rate for the vehicles, then they would need to be stored in a lighted, enclosed by a secure fence or other secure barrier at least 6 feet high. I mean, should we do setbacks be created for this type of use and a maximum amount of storage vehicles be set, maybe? I'd also like to note that it seems that storage facility is not allowed in any district by our bylaws. So I think we really need to distinguish the difference on whether towing is more than 50% of the business and also a 24/7 business, 365 days a year. I think we also need to take into consideration the noise of the backup alarms on tow trucks, the environmental impact, and the curb appeal that tow yards have on our town. So I would suggest the use read, motor vehicle service, establishments engaged in providing structural or mechanical motor vehicle, including automobile or boat repair, washing, service, and towing without the use of lot for stowing towed vehicles. I think we also need to create a new use, lot for stowing towed vehicles, and only allow this in our industrial zones. So, as a resident, that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
I'm sorry, would you mind coming back? I need to ask you a question. Okay. All right? Because I want to be real clear on understanding what you're saying. That you have defining motor vehicle service as we have there seems to be okay in your mind, as long as there's a separate definition for storage and storage only of vehicles.
Yes, that have been towed, that they're not going to be servicing, yes, at that facility, right. So like a tow yard, right?
So in the example that I'm thinking about, if I have a lot that that adheres to all the Mass General laws in terms of vehicle storage, I wouldn't have a tow truck I operate out of there. I would just, they would be coming from somewhere else. Otherwise, that'd be a towing service, right?
Well, it's still included the same, I would think, a towing service. Usually they have a lot where they store their towed vehicles.
So wouldn't that fall under this definition of towing then? Even if whether or not they have a place to store them or not? I mean, I think what you're talking about is a storage lot, and that's all that's there. Cars come in, get parked, and
And they store their tow vehicles there too, yes.
that would, in my mind, that's a towing, that would fall under this. If the towing vehicle is operated out of that facility, that would clearly be a towing service, whether or not they have storage or not.
I don't agree with you. I see a towing service as Charlie crashes his truck down the street, gets towed in, goes in the storage yard till it decides where it's gonna go. Towing service under this definition here, it should be towed for service. I have a repair shop. Your vehicle breaks down, it doesn't start, I tow it in so I can repair it and it goes out. It's a totally different animal.
My other concern
Now-
is you put towing here, I mean, any car wash place can now have towing, right? If you have a motor vehicle service place, how many motor vehicle service places do we have? How many towing business we want operating out of those? You can have towing out of a car wash place, according to this.
I think the intent of adding it is is to include it with issues that are not allowed in certain areas. You know, like right now, you may not be able to have a service station in a certain area or a service facility, but there's nothing in the bylaw to prevent somebody from putting a tow yard there. So by including towing in the definition, it will exclude it from areas where motor vehicle service is not allowed. That's why I said, from a definition standpoint, it's probably works, but from the use chart, where you allow motor vehicle service and some of these other things could be adjusted more, could be narrowed down. Like, there may be a place, a car wash would be perfectly fine, but a tow yard wouldn't work. So, in that sense, lumping them together doesn't work.
Would it satisfy you, sir, if it said washing and towing only of services of vehicles to be serviced?
I would prefer something like that, yes. That would satisfy me a lot better. I just want to make sure that we're not creating these, storage yards for vehicles that have been in accidents and are sitting there leaking fluid and everything else that goes around with the looks of a tow yard. I just want to make sure that this isn't included under that. And I think we may need to establish another line item for a tow yard.
Let's call it a junkyard.
Well, I think of them as junkyards, yes, but I don't know. I think there's a difference between a junkyard and a tow yard.
Yeah, I don't think so. If
I
a
mean,
car
I
is
mean,
impounded, it could
A
go to
junkyard,
storage area.
you
Yeah,
salvage,
understood.
it's like a salvage yard. You resell stuff off of
I'm trying to understand what your concern is so we can address it in the most clear way.
I'm trying to get control under places like, let's say Vaughn's, Mark's, those tow yards with all those vehicles that have been towed from accidents over the weekend, just sitting there out in front of their property. Sometimes they're in a pen, sometimes their pen gets filled, and now we have to look at all of that. And I don't want that in my neighborhood where I live, and I want to make sure that it's not going to come in my neighborhood where I live. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Good. I mean, thank you. I want to understand. So, to your point, Michael, you had said there's towing for service, there's towing for storage, and there's probably towing for scrap, right?
Yeah, but when you say towing business, I agree with this gentleman here.
Mhm.
If I got a tow truck, I'm towing wrecks, I'm towing stuff and I'm putting them in a storage yard, places you're referring to. I agree with them 100%.
Okay,
For a service of vehicles, it should be towed for service. So in other words, I have a garage that I'm doing repairs. Your car doesn't start, I tow it in to repair it. That's totally different. I'm not keeping your car in storage. I'm bringing it in for repairs. It's fixed and it's gone.
But again, in that particular case, you're towing it to a,
Repair facility.
that
If I have a repair facility, I might
that
wanna have my own
theoretically,
record.
that is an allowed use by definition. It could be non-conforming, but it's an allowed use, so there's no problem with towing into it. This is to prevent a tow company from going into an area where motor vehicle service is not allowed and setting up shop because it doesn't say towing in the
That doesn't say
definition.
that. You said washing, towing, or standing You got towing standing there by itself. It doesn't point towing to do a specific service. It just says towing in general. Towing in general is towing wrecks in or whatever, and now we're gonna put them in storage because that's where we make our money.
so if I did want to open an automobile storage facility,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be a commercial use?
Yeah, but it should be a towing, for a towing use only, towing slash for storage.
My
or
point
whatever,
is
in
that
town yard or whatever it might be.
where I'm going here, a motor vehicle service category is a commercial use. So would a storage facility, that would be a commercial use. A junkyard would probably be a commercial use. They're all in the same category anyway, or am I missing something?
I think you're being a little bit too vague. You're giving them too much leeway.
I think what's important to what this gentleman offered was the storage would only be in an industrial. I think he's right, that Michael is right, and Ken, if you make that word "or" to "for service," it meets the intent of Michael, and then a second definition has to be made for towing and storage facilities, and then restricted to
Well,
That needs to be put, that needs to be put under
the
the industrial
storage,
category.
the storage of wrecks, a collection of them, for the most part, is a procedure that is licensed by the town of Wareham. If you have an issue with how that license is being executed, then you do have a reasonable complaint. I know exactly what you mean, the demolished vehicles that are sitting on the edge of Cranberry Highway.
Right, the pen is full, so now they put them on the edge of the road.
So, you know, that is an issue that the Board of Selectmen, as the licensing authority or permitting authority, has control over that use.
Well, there's also in the bylaws, storing junk on your property. So I would consider those storage yards, storing those wrecked vehicles as junk. So I would consider that under that bylaws.
But if that is, if that is a part of their business operation that they've been approved to do, then
Great, I think we have, what, two? We only have two approved for the town of Wareham. You mean approved for the town of Wareham? You mean the police and call, the municipal call?
I don't know how many tow companies we have approved at this current time myself.
I'm not sure either, but my concern is the storage of those wrecked vehicles, and I think you guys understand where I'm concerned and where I'm going with
I
this.
do.
Right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will just note that in the industrial uses, storage facilities, junkyards, and salvage yards are called out, but nothing specifically to automobiles. So that's something we may want to look at in the future, because this gentleman's point's very valid, I think. But I think now we should listen to what Mr. Manise has to say.
He's just bought a tow truck, so he's gonna start towing for service.
Jim and East Cranberry Highway. I have to agree that it should be ancillary to the service of a repair facility. So you bring it there to repair it. And there should be a separate table line for towing yard. Because it just isn't junkyard. You have different setbacks and distances from properties, you know, when they have the warning signal going off at 2 in the morning. You also might consider having during the hours of operation of the service station also. Thank you.
So I think what I'd propose is that we change this for towing for service and move forward with this change for this fall's town meeting, and that this board then take up for a subsequent meeting to address the storage thing. 'Cause it needs to, I don't think it's fair that we do it tonight in a 20-minute period. It needs some debate, it needs some thought, and we need to make sure we do it right, and we can't do it right in 20 minutes. But I think the next thing we should do is go look at the storage facilities, junkyards, and salvage yards definitions under industrial uses and clarify those to address the concern that, what was your first name? Chris. That Chris brought up. But I don't want to try to do it now. That's how we get in trouble. We go too fast.
Will we then adjust that sentence to read towing only of vehicles to be serviced?
I think so.
Make that motion.
As a definition, if you tighten it that much, you could cause headaches. If you're saying, if you're saying it's only, the only thing included in motor vehicle service is the act of towing a broken car to a garage, that's not what this is aimed at. This is aimed at, when you look at the use chart as to what's allowed and what's not allowed, right now towing is not in there. So theoretically, a tow company like the gentleman described could show up in any commercial, industrial zone in town. By putting that in the definition, it'll only be allowed where motor vehicle service is allowed.
But that's the title of 3340.6, motor vehicle service.
That is what I understand from that
Yeah.
article, from that statement, that it's
Yeah.
a garage who repairs cars, and they cannot be driven. So you expect that a tow truck will bring it. That's what I thought we were trying to accomplish.
It's going there to be serviced, to be repaired, not to be stored. The thing is, the storage has to be another definition, it has to be on its own, stand on its own merit. This doesn't do that, this makes it too general, Judge.
I think
I think George is...
what's being identified here, that storage is identified under industrial use. You need to just expand that definition to include storage of automobiles. Doesn't describe storage of automobiles. It's talking about, lay down areas for construction materials or...
It seems like the principal idea behind this particular item is the repair and service.
Yes.
That washing and towing are incidental to the repair and service. So if you were to say, just take out the words washing and towing and make it including automobile or boat repair or service, including washing or towing where washing and towing is incidental to the repair or service facility. That makes it specific to the main idea that this is servicing of vehicles and not storing them, like Mike has talked about. I agree that a separate definition and separate subcategory should be identified for that sort of thing, so that you're keeping the storage of towed vehicles away from just a standard motor vehicle service facility. I mean, all motor vehicle, like the old Square Deal Garage, they used to have a wrecker.
Everybody
To
had
go
records
pick up
in
a
the
wreck,
old
go
days,
pick
sure.
up a wrecked car and bring it in and do the service on it. So it would be that kind of towing, but it's incidental to the service and the repairs that you supply.
The way this reads here is, since towing's allowed, I'm gonna get a wrecker, I'm gonna start collecting cars, towing them in, doing whatever.
If you make it
Now becomes
incidental,
A junkyard or whatever.
if you make it incidental to the main idea of the repairs and service, then it's not the basic, you're not saying, well, I'm going to operate a towing service here and make the repairs and service incidental to the towing.
Yes, sir?
Hi, my name's Neil Ferrera, 2614 Cranberry Highway also. I would just maybe submit that towing is allowed to and from, but maybe not including storage pens or not including vehicles for charge. If you can make some type of additional line item for that to differentiate. I have nothing against automotive repair guys. I think they're great. We all need them. I drive old vehicles, so as far as all the motor vehicles that we had, the repair shops we have, that's great. But are we really opening up that anybody can basically, that has existing motor vehicle service or a car wash, that they can just do the towing and do storage of the vehicles and include all of that? I know in my insurance policy, if I have a breakdown, my insurance covers me to take the vehicle by tow to the nearest available facility that's able to do the repair. And I don't think the idea of towing a vehicle to and from the repair shop is ancillary to one or the other. In other words, I don't think a repair shop is ancillary to towing and towing is ancillary to repair. They're two different total definitions, and generally your towing takes place off that premise where the vehicle breaks down or it's in an accident. So I would suggest that we do some type of an item, added item, for the towing specifically, that where they're charging a storage fee and they're putting up a pen. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Withdraw my motion?
I mean, pick an area where motor vehicle service is not allowed. Have you used shadow?
Not allowed? It's only highlighted under commercial.
On the use chart itself,
Motor vehicle service is allowed, service is allowed in WV1, Onset Village 1, C, commercial strip through special permit zoning, commercial CG, what's CG?
General.
Commercial general through special permit zoning, and industrial.
so it's.
How the villages ever got it just amazes me.
Well, I think the village inherited them from the olden days.
Yeah.
You know, there was a garage
hear
in
you.
town, and, you know, like I said, in the olden days, when we were young, Charlie, everybody had a tow truck.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
So
because that's how the cars
did
got
I
to the
answer your
garage.
question, George?
But he had a roll.
No, no, no.
A very short one.
So where are we?
So we're gonna modify, I think we can use the definition the way it is. I think if we left towing for service, take the
So-
or out of there.
so
That way
that
there,
would-
it doesn't make it a general term.
That would make towing as of right use in the villages.
For service. If I had a garage in the village, yeah, I can tow by right, I can have a tow truck to bring the car to my shop to work on.
So
For
Emmanuel, what was your original motion? Towing for service?
Towing, okay, washing, comma, and, washing, excuse me, I'll start again. Repair, washing, and towing only of vehicles to be serviced.
Yeah, I think your motion's still good.
I'll remake my motion.
Take a second on that, Judge?
Sure.
Thank you.
And Chris, we'll follow up on the second part, all right?
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Next?
Now for something simple. Marijuana facilities.
Anywhere they want to put them.
Currently, the medical marijuana dispensary is allowed in the institutional zoning district only. What's suggested is that it be done by special permit, be allowed by special permit in other districts where marijuana establishments are allowed, which are under 392, the Strip Commercial District east of Glen Charlie Road, the institutional district, and the industrial zoning districts. That the number of medical marijuana treatment centers be limited to a total of one such establishment in the town, and that there be no separation required between a marijuana treatment center and a retail center, which means they could coexist at one location as they're allowed under state law and regulation.
You mentioned marijuana, look what comes.
Peter comes.
As we stated before, this was to kind of correct the situation we have where we zoned for medicinal and then the state came in behind our zoning change and put recreational in the medicinal center. And this reflects a change that would give that use a little more flexibility.
Gives who more flexibility?
Gives the medicinal license a little more flexibility as to where it's located.
I mean, let's be real clear. The Verilife facility selling medical can only be where they are right now in the institutional zone. That's the only place they can be.
What's wrong with that? That's fine.
There's a lot of people in this town that don't like it there, and including the company itself.
Well, I don't think it's the medical, it's overrun by the recreational.
So,
That's not our problem,
Right,
because
they
got both
chose to put
licenses.
the coexist with the recreational.
You know, why should we bear the burden of that? Because it doesn't fit in that situation. We have to change all our rules and bylaws to accommodate them? I
They-
don't think that's fair.
they moved there because of the rules that we put in place.
Well, they moved there to get the jump on the right of first refusal on the recreational,
That's the only place that we would let them move.
and we're not telling them they can't stay there.
But this community doesn't want them there. And we're trying to fix it so they can move. They'll move in a heartbeat.
When we said institutional, they went there for the medical originally,
Which is all they could do.
which was no problem, because they inherited the way the state changed the rules.
Why do you say it was no,
recreational.
why do you say it was no problem?
Well, when we went for the bylaw change to put them in an institutional area, it wasn't a problem. People weren't offended by it, people weren't crazy about it, but it was a good place to put it. Now, the state comes and says, okay, if you're selling medical, you can sell recreational too. So they get a twofer. So now we gotta accommodate our laws to accommodate them. Tell them to go buy another place someplace else. They're making plenty of money.
I disagree 1,000%, Michael. We forced them to where they are.
We didn't tell them to put recreational there.
They never solely sold municipal product there. The only time sales started was when it went recreational. It was, they gamed the system.
That's not true.
I don't think they're going anywhere. They're doing quite well where they are, and to not make an adjustment just makes the neighbors and the people trying to transit Main Street have to deal with the situation. that they
Mr.
shouldn't have to-
Buckland, do you have a comment
they
on
shouldn't have
that?
to deal with. Whether that situation would decline with more centers opened up, you would think so, but it's still, it does put a burden on that end of Main Street, and Main Street as a whole, and the whole street comes to a stop and backs up all the way through in both directions, backs people up over the railroad tracks, down Minot Ave.
If I may comment on that, the police officer could help in that situation. Traffic is running by, and there's a person with a black bag 500 feet down the road. He stops the traffic, and the person with their black bag takes their time while the traffic is backing up past Narrows and past New England Refrigeration. Hey, have them wait a little bit and move the traffic, but that's beside the point.
Well,
That could be
I
ameliorated.
don't know what instructions they're given, but I share your frustration.
But will they be is this not two separate entities, though? I mean, same ownership, corporate, but you have a medical dispensary and you have a retail. Does that make it four?
The licensing is coming all under the Cannabis Control Commission at this time.
I'm sorry?
The Cannabis Control Commission regulates all dispensaries and marijuana establishments at this time.
So we are required to permit 3+, 3 retail plus it isn't a
Plus
total
the
of 3,
medicinal.
plus the medicinal. No?
In the history of it, what happened was you decided back at some point to say, when medical marijuana was approved by the state and your ballot, that it would be allowed only in the institutional district. When the law changed and other marijuana establishments were allowed, we created a zoning bylaw that allowed it within 3 different distinct areas: in the institutional district where it was, in the industrial zoning districts, and in the commercial strip. We did not allow any more medical marijuana establishments, keeping it within the institutional zoning district, which really only allows one spot to locate that because of the other setback requirements and the use of the institutional zoning district. When the Verilife applied for their medical marijuana dispensary, they got their host community agreement from the town. Under the new state law and regulations, they were allowed to coexist to go after a second license for a recreational adult use license as a marijuana establishment. When we also passed this new bylaw, we followed the state requirement that said that we could have 20%. We could limit the number of adult use recreational marijuana establishments to 20% of the alcohol licenses that we issue as a town. We issue 13, so our minimum requirement was 3. So what we said was, let's distribute them throughout the town. We can have 1 in the downtown, in the institutional zone district, 1 on the east side of town in the commercial strip district, and 1 on the west side of town in the industrial district, thereby spreading them out across the town and having a separation requirement between them. Well, that's what we've ended up with. So we have 3 retail licenses, host community agreements that have been issued. They haven't been all fully licensed by the state as yet. And what we're doing is allowing that maybe that we didn't make the right choice by saying medical only in the downtown institutional zoning district and having the recreational there as well too, and the activity that goes along with that. What we can do is allow the medical marijuana to be elsewhere, so that that user that has the medical license, Pharmacanis, Verilife, can transfer that to another location within town and take it away from that location. And they have been actively looking at other locations.
Such as? Well, when they put their second license here, they got 2 licenses. They got a medical and recreation. They decided to put their recreational the same place where the medical was. They could have went elsewhere at that time. Why should we kiss their ass? Excuse my language, I'm not supposed to swear, but...
Well, Michael, that would mean they'd have to have 2 facilities.
Well, that's their problem, not ours.
But we forced them into this.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't.
Oh, man,
We didn't.
I don't get
I
it.
don't agree, but, no.
They didn't have to co-occupy those two
Right.
businesses in the same
It's their
building.
decision to have both licensed in one place.
I mean, what's the end goal here? To get them out totally?
No, they keep their medical there, put their recreational someplace else. That's all. That's their problem, not ours.
That makes no sense. That would mean we have 4 facilities in town. We have the opportunity with this change to keep it to 3.
Are they committing to co-occupy in a new location?
The thing is,
Yes, they are.
it's all the flack that comes with it, the
This is a
traffic.
no-brainer.
No,
Where are they
everything
planning
else.
on going?
In one of the other zoning districts, either industrial or the commercial strip.
Yeah, I understand that, but you
Where
don't
would-
have a definitive place, so how do you know the new location is gonna be any less of a nuisance than where they are now?
Well, we, as a town, picked the 3 locations, institutional district, the commercial strip on the east side, and the industrial on the west side. It has to go into one of those locations. It's not working in the institutional district, so they've got to choose between the other 2.
I understand you saying that, but the reason that we're having this discussion is because of all the traffic concerns and the irritation of having them where they are. So, yeah, maybe we did make a bad decision in the beginning, and they landed where they did. But if you don't know where they're going, what makes you think that their new location is gonna be any less irritating than where they are currently? At which point, this doesn't affect any change at all.
I agree with that, but I also think that we should have let the other 2 establishments get put in place before we measure this.
Yes.
We're speculating right now that this congestion is going to exist. When the competition moves into the Cranberry Highway and moves into the other location, it dilutes the entire formula, and you probably won't have this congestion problem. It'll at least be split in thirds in my mind.
Yeah, and I agree with Emmanuel. I think the details that are controlling traffic need some instruction. Because I've witnessed what he's describing. The person that he's stopping traffic
Yeah, they
for
have
is a
preference.
football field away, rather than on the curb where you have to cross.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Member Bianco kind of stole my thunder. You've got 2 other licenses out there. I actually spoke on Saturday night with the gentleman who's the driving force behind the one that's going into the industrial park, and he said he's about 6 months away from getting up and running. Seems to me a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to one summer with a few traffic backups. I mean, I've been back and forth through there all summer long. Yeah, a couple of times I've seen it over the railroad tracks. A couple of times I've seen it backed up maybe as far as Cumberland Farms. I've never seen gridlock there once like it was when I was a kid in the summertime before we had highways and everything else. I think people forget what this town was the main route to get to Cape Cod from New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, right up until the mid-'70s. You know, I think they're trying to tweak the law, move it around, and essentially, the way I'm reading it, it's actually trying to create favorable conditions for one business that may work to the detriment of the other 2 licensees, which could cause this board some problems in that regard in the town and town meeting as well.
In what way?
Going forward. Because basically the concern is that they're in too small a location and they could go make money somewhere else. That's what they're interested in. They don't care about traffic. They don't care about any of those considerations. They care about the fact that they've got 3 retail windows, somebody else opens up and they have 10, and then all of a sudden they're at a slightly competitive disadvantage. This is what they care about. I mean, they own that building down there. They bought it. They've already put their coin out for that. The only reason they would want to move is to sell more stuff and make more money. So I don't know that the town really should be abetting that at this point. One of the things I've thought all along, since we did get the bylaw, you know, with your advice and consent, and with town meeting of passing it unanimously through, is that we needed to sit and see what would happen when the 3 retail places were open before we started worrying about, well, something's going on over here, so we better stick it over there. I just don't think that's a good way to govern this.
I'm not familiar with the host agreement, but could they split the license now? Could they move their recreational license to another site?
They'd have to re-sign another host community agreement separating.
But that's local authority, that's not the control commission.
No, it'd be the control commission as well, too. The Cannabis Control Commission would have to approve the new location.
Right, the Cannabis Control Commission would go through that whole security analysis, you know, the same thing that they went through initially, saying you gotta have these vaults, you gotta have, they would make them tick all of those boxes again, so they would have to go through that process. But they would have to go through that process if they moved both together. So that's not really a consideration as far as this goes. It doesn't make it any easier for them to move if you pass this. It just means that they can bring the medicinal along with it. And the other thing is, we did try for a geographic spread with this. That was the whole intent here. You know, this town's like 12 miles long if you go from, you know, Cohasset Narrows all the way up to Route 58. And part of the reasoning for coming up with the 3 districts was so that hopefully, and this is how it did shake out, we would allocate those 3 retail licenses, 1 per district. And if you look at a couple of the districts, they're set up basically so it would be pretty hard to get more than 1 in them. The institutional district, you know, forget it. You're not getting another retail in there because to get, you know, the requisite distance away from from Verilife, you're up against a church, then you're up against a school. You know, you can't. They stuck that thing in like 1 of 4 buildings down there. You could do it. In the industrial park, they'd have to go. I don't think they could put one in where Jesse Pitts' operation is going. I don't think there's a 1,500 clearance for them in there. There may be if they were go to the other side of Patterson Brook, but now you're throwing 2 of these establishments in West Wareham, which is already suffering a lot of retail traffic coming from other towns. You know, again, part of the idea was to make it easier for our people to get to these places, but it was also so that once all 3 were open, the traffic burden would be distributed. And if you go ahead and allow this, then you lose the control over that. At least as to 2 of the 3 establishments.
Lose control over,
Having the traffic apportioned sort of equally and spread out across the town. Look, if these places are getting 800 people on the weekend, and for some reason you put in the second one and they too get 800 people on the weekend, do you want another, you know, 1,600 parties going out to West Wareham, Patterson Brook, clogging up around the lights there and everything else? I mean, it's going to look like Christmas time 24/7, 365 a year.
My understanding of the second facility that's going in on the Cranberry Highway is that it's going to be by appointment only. So you're going to need to make your selection online, book an appointment, and then you're only going in there to pick up. It's not this open retail environment where you just walk into the front door. So they can change their business model to have a more controlled traffic pattern where you don't pull off of Route 25.
I don't know why they would, but they could. But we didn't make them do that in the host community agreement, so we're not going to be able to go back and revisit the business model, so.
so, Peter, let me summarize what I heard, or one key point of it anyway, what I heard was that rather than make a reaction to the issues that we're seeing today, that if we wait 6 months where the industrial park facility is open and the Cranberry Highway facility is open, then we'll have a much better data set to make a decision on in terms of the impact. Because the basic assumption is the traffic issues are going to drop significantly with the 2 facilities opening.
Yes, remember, this was the 4th facility in the entire state to open. You know, but as more facilities open, that's going to drop off unless they've got some particular kind of stuff that nobody else has and everybody wants. I don't know. I don't follow the marijuana industry that closely. But I've actually heard people complaining online about the selection that they have there, that they don't have enough. So, I mean, who knows? I think you need to let the marketplace shake out before we start injecting ourselves further into it.
I agree.
I
But
agree.
The way this is written, I think anybody at town meeting that reads this is going to look at it as a custom-built change to the law for one specific company. And they're just not going to swallow it.
That's how Michael, I have to be really honest, that's how I looked at it. It was being written specifically to get Verilife out of downtown Wareham Village. Because of all I mean, that's all I hear from the people I talk to. They don't like it there. They want it somewhere else. I'm asked all the time, why do they?
All you're going to do is you're going to change that group of people with another group of people. No matter where it lands, if it lands in traffic, somebody's going to be uptight over it.
I hear that. But To your point, though, if someone had asked me, are we doing this specifically for Verilife, I would have said yes.
Yeah, but there was an argument at one point that this was part of the revitalization of the Main Street. This brought a new audience down to the Main Street. So we abandoned that whole, this stuff hasn't even been going a year, and we're not even proving that it has benefited for that reason.
Well, there is some anecdotal stuff. If you go in and talk to Americana Cafe, I think a little bit more Mama Mary's, they're seeing a little bit of an uptick in business. One of the issues, of course, we have down there is that we don't really have an organization of business owners on Main Street that is sort of promoting Main Street as a business destination. And so, absent that, Ken and I have talked on the redevelopment authority about how to sort of motivate that, how to generate that, how to get the businesses to sign up. We've talked to a few of the shop owners and said, listen, Verilife is very happy to put out a flyer. You guys prepare a flyer, they'll have it right on the counter, and then people can, pick it up and, see what there is to do down there. Because there are some things to do down there, but that just hasn't really been promoted yet. But the restaurants do seem to be picking up a little bit of difference. And again, as somebody who, basically jumped across car hoods in the 60s to get across the street down there, this is nothing.
Oh, Peter, I'm sorry. I have a different view of that. I've been doing that drive from Indian Neck to Main Street for 40 years. After Route 25 was finished, hasn't been this bad. I'm sorry. The traffic has been bad. But if I would just as soon wait, too. I don't see the reason to.
I'm sorry, Emmanuel. I agree the traffic has been bad this year. My office is on the Cranberry Highway, but I almost think that the Village of Onset has been doing a better job with promoting their activities down there, and it's driving traffic from 3 directions through Main Street. And that, to just contribute the congestion on Main Street to Verilife, I'm not sure that this is the case.
Waze is a contributing factor.
Waze is a contributing factor, but there'll be no reason to deviate off of 25 or the Cranberry Highway to downtown Main Street, Wareham, when the other 2 facilities are there. You bail out an exit 2 or you bail out an exit 1. What's going to draw you except some exceptional product or some discounted product to that location? I will say that this is a sensitive subject with me altogether, but the fact that we only have 1 medical license, I do have a bit of an issue with that from a competition perspective, because now that one license is issued, and this will continue to be a one-sided story unless we have a second voice at the table.
Well, further to that point, I don't believe, the way I read the existing bylaw, the first section that talks about municipal, it doesn't limit it to 1 license. It limits it to simply that 1 zoning district, which de facto makes it 1 license, but sort of de jure. In other words, it's not enshrined in there that you can only have 1 medicinal. As a practical matter, you're never going to fit another one in there. That's the reason you see the second bolded portion here, which would be the change, which would limit it to the 1, because that isn't in there right now.
It's unlimited medical right now.
In my mind, this whole municipal medical should be attached close to a healthcare facility. I mean, this is the purpose behind this. If they had an outlet in the Rosebrook Medical Building, that would make perfect sense to me.
If it were truly intended to be medicinal, it would be in the pharmacy.
I know, but it's almost out the door right now. I don't even know why it exists anymore in the state of Massachusetts. It can exist everywhere else, but why is there even a purpose for 2 variations of this license anymore? Blue Cross doesn't cover it, do they? You still got to pay full price out of pocket. They do? Oh.
The advantage to the medicinal, I guess, as I understand it, is you don't get whacked with as much of a state tax, so it's cheaper.
It is cheap.
All right, well.
So I'm going to make a motion
Wait a
that-
second. Before you make any motions,
Sorry.
I'd like to say something.
I'm sorry, Jimmy, I didn't see you there.
Mr. Swenson. I'm looking at this, and everybody's talking about Verilife. They're grandfathered in where they are. So no matter what you do here isn't going to affect them, correct?
No, opens the door for them to move.
Right?
Well,
No, they don't have to move,
But they
no
want
matter
to.
what you do. Well, if they want to do, they can move if they want to move, as long as they cover the distances between the different places and whatever. I don't understand why you'd have, on the second paragraph there, institutional. I would take that out. Shall be allowed special permit and Christmas, institutional? No, you don't want that in there, at least as far as I'm concerned.
So you're suggesting that we remove institutional as a place where we could have a...
On the second
let me
one, and
finish.
nobody else can
Let-
move into it,
That's the existing bylaw, but yes.
because then no one else can move into it.
Can-
Once they left, nobody could move into it, because it's not on the bylaw for the institutional area. The medical marijuana treatment centers, I don't think you should limit to one and give monopoly on it, you know? If you're gonna allow recreational, why couldn't they do medicinal if they wanted it also? And, did the planning board sponsor this? Did you put this together? Is this your bylaw?
Yes.
No? Yes. Okay, thanks.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, I had thought that the zoning board of appeals was interested in this sort of a change. Is that in addition to the planning board's interest, or?
They were a little more liberal in their approach.
Okay,
The way the zoning
Gotcha.
appeal works now, they're gonna rubber stamp anything anybody wants anyway. I mean, they're like a runaway freight train now.
We didn't initiate this.
They're only going to allow...
I can't respond to such a political statement.
They're only going to allow them on ancient ways.
So, so given the fact that some new food for thought around traffic, and the expected change in traffic patterns that are going to happen within the next 6 months with the opening of 2 other retail establishments is probably and very likely going to impact the situation we have in Wareham Village right now.
Well, what's gonna happen with this, the one in Industrial Park, the parking situation, the traffic situation, coming out of Patterson Brook Road, that light going across from the mall is gonna be a nightmare. You know, the handwriting's on the wall. Look what it's done to Main Street.
Well, at least you've got a signalized intersection there, and you've got wide roads
You'll be
and...
backed up all the way down to the crouton factory.
So what should we do then, Michael?
I don't know.
Put in a new off-ramp
Once-
off of 25.
Yeah.
You know,
So, if I can finish what I was going to say. Given the expected change in traffic, I think the wise thing to do right now is put this on hold for 6 months, at least 6 months, and let's see what that impact is, and make a more educated decision on how we deal with the problems that we're facing now, because they're going to change. They're going to change drastically in the next 6 months, and we hadn't thought about that clearly before. So it'd be my recommendation and my motion that we put this on hold for now.
Gentlemen, excuse me, this is why I brought this up earlier. To your point, Michael, is that, you know, we're making a subdivision, approving a subdivision tonight on the intent of a facility going there, without not having enough foresight.
That's only gonna be a grow facility. It's not gonna be any sales there.
Retail there.
It's just right now.
Okay.
That subdivision wasn't approved for anything yet. Only the fact now it's got frontage, that's all. So it doesn't matter whether anything to do with marijuana goes there or some other kind of commercial or industrial establishment goes in there.
If it's not gonna be approved for that purpose, why would you even go through the expense of making the modifications or spending the money on the subdivision?
This is
They
the third
didn't-
time we've modified that,
Yeah.
the end of the road, and still nothing's, not a shovel in the ground, so.
There's no guarantee what's
Yeah.
going to go in there yet.
All right.
I agree with Richard. I think we should table this.
So I make the motion, we table this for further study.
Second?
Are we at, has this been submitted for
No,
placement on the warrant?
this is not.
There's no other public input? I don't know.
That's probably a smart question to ask, isn't it?
Is there any further public input? And so, at this time, you're saying you do not wish to submit this for, you made a motion to table, correct?
Correct.
believe there's any discussion on that point, so I would ask all in favor?
This comes a real beauty now, Josh.
I,
Opposed?
All right, moving on then.
Mm-hmm.
A moratorium on social consumption marijuana establishments. The Attorney General has allowed that moratoria can be up to 1 year in place. And so we're suggesting that we create a 1 year moratorium. It could be continued in a year if there still isn't clarity on the,
Does a year line up with a scheduled town meeting? I wouldn't want the moratorium to expire 2 weeks before town meeting was gonna start and somebody submit an application.
they would still need to have sign a host community agreement. It wouldn't be just an application for zoning relief.
Just to clarify, there's no current regulations in place that have been adopted by the Cannabis Control Commission to license these facilities. This concept seems to be in the cloud, so to speak. You know, it was proposed as part of, you know, the initial legislation in legalizing marijuana. The governor said, well, I'd like to see pilot programs. The Cannabis Control Commission has said, as I understand it, and Ken can amplify because he tracks it more closely than I do, but they said, well, yeah, well, let's think about how that sort of thing would look, and I haven't heard boo since.
There's two.
That's the same thing they said with medicinal marijuana.
Yeah,
Or
it'll come in a rush, so my advice would be, to me, this is a no-brainer. You're not preventing some lucrative activity of the town because the activity isn't currently legal in the sense that there's a regulatory framework for it. There was a couple that came before the redevelopment authority. They had an interesting plan. I mean, we have no authority to adopt host community agreements or do any of that kind of stuff. They were looking to do a shop where they would provide a limousine service to and from, so you didn't have to worry about, you know, people getting high and then getting on the road. You know, it was a very interesting proposal, and to the extent that these things ever take place, that's the sort of business model I think you would want to see if you were forced to have these places. But again, they can't go anywhere because there's no real application pipeline for them set up by the state yet. So if you get this through the October town meeting, you're good until the next October, and it's valid until you know, the Attorney General has ruled that they will be valid for a year after passing. So even if the Cannabis Control Commission turns around and does something, you know, you still should be good. If worse comes to worse, you can call a special town meeting down the road and adopt the regulations the town would want to see to regulate it beyond what the state does, if for some reason a moratorium were held to be invalid. But I think it makes sense now to adopt it and just have it in place.
It's funny, a alcohol license in this town got suspended and fined for doing that same thing, getting people a ride home. But yes, let's see what the state comes up with before we issue carte blanche.
Make a motion that we accept Article 399.
Or we should, any other?
I would just ask if there's any public comment before we put a motion on the table. Seeing none?
Shall I read it or just refer to the
Just
article?
refer to it and recommend it.
399 recommended we approve it.
second.
Motion made by Emmanuel, seconded by Mike King. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you, gentlemen. At the very minimum, you save the Board of Selectmen a lot of headaches by doing this right now.
Oh, can we change it?
What if the town meeting doesn't accept the moratorium?
Then it still requires a host community agreement to be put in place for any use. So there's still a control that the
Would be mandated by
town
the
has.
state.
And I would argue that social consumption is a unique use and could be regulated out, and it's not included in the zoning bylaw, so would be prohibited.
Next item on the agenda is, let's close the public hearing first, if we could.
You got two others. Oh, you got two others on
Oh,
there.
do you? I thought we covered them all.
No, I'll get two more.
No.
So wait, there's more.
Oh,
Oh, wait.
I must have gone for popcorn or something. Go ahead, Ken, I'm sorry.
One of the things that was pointed out by several developers was that the Wareham Village 1 district and Wareham Village 2 district were less dense, less intense use than the Onset Village 1 and Onset Village 2 district. So the idea would be to make them both the same. Right now, the Wareham Village 1 and Wareham Village 2 district are about twice the size requirements, so it's less dense than the Onset Village 1 and Onset Village 2. Emmanuel and I had a conversation about this today, and I'm having second thoughts about providing this to town meeting as well. I think, and we do have the option for a grant that's being provided by Mass Development to do a study of downtown. And with that, we'll be looking at really what's appropriate density for trying to make change in the downtown village. With that information, we can come back to this and start to tweak the numbers as to what the appropriate density of residential uses would be within the town, within those districts. So it's still up to you at this point if you want to advance it, but I'm recommending waiting until we have the urban designers in to give us a little better idea of what's going to go on there.
That makes sense.
I agree.
Is there any public input other than Ken?
Entertain a motion to put this one on hold, George?
Sure.
Did you make the motion?
He did.
I second it.
Motion to table. Sound right? Made by Mike Baptiste, seconded by Emmanuel. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved.
Ken, how long would it take them to produce that report?
Production of the report would probably be, we're just making the application right now. We're assured we're going to get it. They have to organize the team of designers. So I would say it's probably 4 months out.
So we would make spring meeting with the input?
Quite possible we could make Springtown meeting. We'll ask for that specifically, as a matter of fact.
Ken, does that include the possibility of having the design team or representatives, say, come before the planning board to present some of their findings as they go along?
Actually, what they would do is have a one-day workshop charrette where they prepare themselves in the weeks before, come into town for 1 day, work with the different boards and committees in a public process, and then produce a report at the end of the day that they would go back in and later write up and provide to us in a written form. So there will be participation. It'll be rather intensive for the day, so we'll have to have it properly scheduled for the logistics. The last item is the signs, and here's what happened. In Springtown meeting, we submitted an article that changed some of the sign bylaw And what it did was it changed the subsection on political signs. The Attorney General came back and said, you can't regulate signs by the specific content. And this is based on a Supreme Court case, Reed versus the town of Gilbert, where the Supreme Court said, you can't distinguish between, say, a business and a church in your zoning regulations. You have to distinguish by district, by the size of the sign, the configuration that the sign might have, but not by the content. So the Attorney General, when looking through the zoning bylaw proposals that had been voted on by town meeting, said, not only are your proposals, your amendments rejected, but you have to go back and look at your sign bylaw again and reconsider all of it. So you take out those items that have content-related descriptions.
So what do we put, vote maybe on question 3? If we got to be neutral? No, I get you now that she explained it. That would be the existing sign bylaw that they previously approved? Is that what
Which
the
was the-
AG's saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Article 11, the sign bylaw.
So we can't dictate the messaging on the sign, we can only dictate the placement and dimensions.
And yes, and
We can regulate it by district.
height and by district.
So is this revision done?
No, it's not.
So then how can we present it?
Yeah, how do we bring it forward?
Good question.
If they don't have anything to view,
So what,
We can advance this for,
we should hand this to the author of the sign bylaw and tell him fix it?
where you going here, Ken?
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for.
I'd like to set up a committee to talk about the signs, because I'd like to get some input on what people think are content related. Because I went through this once, an exercise. I marked up the bylaw, but in my understanding of what the content related issues are, I'm not sure if I really hit it correctly. So what I'd
So
like is
it
to have
sounds like you could not differentiate between a political sign and a job site sign.
correct.
So we'd need to remove those categories and just say temporary signs,
Right.
you know, stuff like that.
Can we read the decision by the Attorney General?
Yes, you can. I'll send it around to you.
So is this a planning board issue just to us, or is, I mean, I know there's a lot of people in town leadership that are concerned about signs outside this planning board.
Well, then maybe what you want to do is suggest a different subcommittee
What,
or committee to look at signs.
what's our
Sign bylaws.
deadline for submitting this?
I don't know, I'll have to turn to,
Next Tuesday, I believe.
I'm sorry, what was,
next Tuesday.
the
The warrant closes next Tuesday.
yeah, we're not getting it.
Usually close the second Tuesday.
So, what do you think, spring?
I mean, we as a
Think
board
this is something we
aren't,
could accomplish between now and then?
I mean, the content or the messaging on the sign isn't something that this board needs to address. We need to address the aesthetics and dimensions of the sign.
The
I have some individual
The
interests, but
existing sign bylaw differentiates between political, job site, permanent signs, and I think that's what he's talking about needs to be corrected.
So, in just looking at the type of signs, I can see it here. There's, you know, off-premise sign, ladder sign, projecting sign,
Well, you have to-
sandwich sign,
you
but
have to
then all of
look
a sudden you get political sign.
You have construction sign, landmark sign, medical marijuana treatment center sign, political sign, public service sign.
So there's
They're all content.
there's types of signs, physical types of signs, and then there's content types of signs.
Right.
So I think the first thing we need to do is take a look at what the Attorney General said, and so we understand clearly where the issues are that they believe need to be addressed. And then once we understand that and understand it clearly, it'd be a lot easier to come up with a plan to fix it.
That's the work plan. I was asking about who would be responsible for it, how you want to organize this.
I'm suggesting that maybe we still need to do that understanding of the issue, because that's going to tell us who the right people are. I'm not, married to that. I'm just throwing it out. But I think we need to clearly understand the problem before we come up with the plan, and the people that are going to do it. Now, I'll be happy to put a summary together and bring it to this board of what the Attorney General is saying and how I think that applies to the current law, and then we can make a decision, if that's acceptable. I mean, I'll volunteer to do that.
But the deadline for that will be closing before we meet again. Yes.
I stand corrected, the articles have to be in Thursday the 5th. Not the 5th.
Do we have a hard stop on getting it in Fall Town meeting? I mean, is that a mandatory?
No.
Then we can't rush this. I mean, rushing things through is not good. It needs to be thought out and,
That's kind of how we ended up with
pardon me?
that's kind of how we ended up with what we have now.
I agree. So
Yeah.
I think we pass fall meeting and go for spring.
We don't run the risk of running afoul of the Attorney General by not addressing this, though, do we?
Only if somebody appeals a decision that's made on the basis of content in the sign.
What? Claire, can you help me out here?
I can, I think. In terms of a timeline,
Would you identify yourself, please?
Claire Smith, town moderator. In terms of the timeline, you have to have your articles in by September 5th. However, because we're doing electronic voting, all of the motions have to be completely finished as they are going to be presented in the PowerPoint 2 weeks prior to town meeting. Because that will fall on a Monday, that means you have to have them in on the Thursday before so that we can get them out to Ohio, which I think is maybe October 10th. So that's your timeline for finishing up your motions.
So we have the meetings in September to finish motions.
But, I mean, in regards to a public hearing, that public hearing has a whole different purpose of tonight. I think we need to schedule another public hearing. I see a lot of opposition on these signs here. Political, temporary, directional. This affects just about every business and every social group in the town.
Richard, how long will it take you to do that analysis?
I have to see, I would think I'd be able to do it in a week, but I haven't seen the decision. And until I see that, I have to, be a little flexible on that.
Would that be something town council needs to be involved in?
It's on the town website, on the town clerks, under town clerk.
Let me look at it tomorrow, okay? Peter, do you have something?
Just on the signs, I'd suggest setting up a further study committee. I think that should be your warrant article. There's a lot more than just the political content that some people are concerned about. The thing is 19 pages long, And even at the time it was adopted, there was some concerns that perhaps it was a little bit overly burdensome on certain businesses. I know, for example, we don't allow the banana signs technically. I mean, if I had a ticket book, I could probably pull in $100,000 with all the ones I see around town. There's a lot of provisions in there that just don't really seem all that enforceable. I think it was perhaps written for a different kind of town. Perhaps it was already built out, they had everything there they needed, and then they were just trying to keep the signs from blocking the stuff they already had. We're a little bit different in that we're a town that's still developing, still emerging, and I think some of the sign requirements may be a little restrictive in that regard. And I'm not just saying this for myself, I've heard this from a lot of people. So I really think that there should be a step back from the current law and put together a study committee that could just look at the thing overall again and, take your time, and instead of trying to piecemeal it every other town meeting or here and there, just try to fix the problems that are evident once and move on. If you'd like, I can bring that up to the Board of Selectmen and see if they'd endorse something like that at Tuesday night, but I'll defer to whatever you folks want on that.
To add to that, I think that given the situation we're in, it would be very wise to talk to other towns and see what they have and look at their regulations and talk to them and say, are they working, are they not working, is there issues, is there contention, find towns that have a system that seems to work well and try to learn from that. It isn't that big, that hard of a thing to do, and we've got an awful lot of text in here about signs and, I mean.
Are you suggesting these changes are going to be able to trigger existing signs?
No, I think anybody who's got something up now should be grandfathered. I mean, I don't think we should create a cottage sign industry making, industry making signs in town to replace all the signs that are here now by any stretch. But, I mean, let's face it, most of the hullabaloo with any regulation comes along when somebody new wants to try something, or they want to do something that's currently prohibited. For example, the people that are putting out the banana signs, you've got the sandwich signs that are out. We allow restaurants to put them out, but other people are now starting to sprinkle them here and there because they see the restaurants, they don't know the bylaw, and they say, oh, I can do that, and then voila, you got something else out on the sidewalk. So it's really, that's the sort of thing. I can't imagine that anybody would want to look back and try to replace existing signage.
So I'm hearing that you want to do more than just make it content neutral, you want to review the whole sign bylaw? Is that what I'm?
I think we should take until next meeting to give us an opportunity to scope this out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with what Peter said, that we should not try to rush it through.
Well, for sure, for the purpose of this meeting, nothing's going to make it into the fall. So we should at least take a pass on that.
Our next meeting is after the deadline for submitting articles.
That's fine.
I guess that's that.
So I take it you want to do this in the spring?
You're going to need that long. I mean, in light of what's been in front of us recently, I personally have a concern with the whole Delta Dental, was it Delta Dental that was in front of us? Let's plaster signs on all three sides of the building, and, I think there's some adjustments that are needed here. I mean, the illuminations of some of the signs that are along all of our newly developed areas along Toby Road seem a little excessive for some of the businesses there. So.
What was that, Article 11, huh?
So Georgie, you'll entertain a motion to move that one to Springtown meeting?
Sure.
Do we foresee a lot of signs having to be redeveloped along the Cranberry Highway with the construction there? Trying to notice what's going on there.
A lot of them are probably going to be removed.
Removed, right?
And replaced.
Yeah.
We've had a report that's been submitted to the town, to my office. I can get you a copy that identifies each sign that has to be moved as a result of the construction.
But that construction will fund the moving of the sign or in replacement of it if necessary?
Depends on if the sign is in the, last I knew, if the sign was in the state right-of-way, it is the owner's, they'll remove it. It's the owner's responsibility to put it back. If it is outside the right-of-way, but it is advantageous for the state to either temporarily or permanently move it, they are picking up the cost, is what I was told a while ago. A lot of these signs out there are within the right-of-way, or they're within the state-accepted setback. I hope there is some relief granted to the businesses down there as far as pre-existing non-conforming signs, and, you know, they're gonna face enough of an impact with 3 years or more of disturbance to their business. They don't need to be penalized for having a sign. I know at one point there were some people that were drooling over the thought of re-permitting every sign on Cranberry Highway.
There's still going to be about 30 signs that are moved.
Mhm. So, there was a motion made to table. I didn't write down that we acted on that, so.
We might need a lawyer for this. Wow.
Can I get a vote? All in favor of tabling the sign bylaw?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mike. Very good. Now?
Now,
Can move on? The covenant release, that's still ongoing? Jordan, Jonathan, Skipper's Way? that one?
yes, haven't gotten any response yet on the covenant release.
And Bay Point Phase 1 partial release, it seemed to me.
You have a report from Charlie Rowley making a recommendation on the surety release number 7.
Okay, that's the August 12th.
Point of order. Public hearing.
We thought we'd keep it open just for general.
Entertain a motion to close the public hearing for
Sure.
town meeting articles.
Lord.
Second.
Guess they want to keep it open. Is there a second?
There was.
Second?
Second.
There was.
Motion made by Mike Baptiste. I didn't, you guys want to arm wrestle on the second?
I'll give it to Emmanuel.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Bay Point Phase 1 partial release.
The total amount recommended for release is $26,584.50.
Yeah, they're doing good. You satisfied with them?
I'm satisfied with my report, yeah. I haven't seen much action to repair some of the erosion in the drainage areas or complete sidewalks, so that's why I recommended reductions in the amount they were requesting.
How much is left in the Phase 1 surety?
Some 300,000.
Substantial. There's quite a bit left.
Motion to give them $26,584.50.
Motion been made by Mike Baptiste. Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion. Seconded by Emmanuel. My only concern that we're getting into a routine here where we've now become the piggy bank. I know we entered into that arrangement a few years ago when we said we weren't gonna do that anymore, but,
You mean in terms of partial releases?
yeah.
Well, I think that's the only way we can control it. it's
they're-
working.
They have a complete list of the various items that they're taking this information from.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing inspections based on the work that's covered under each item, making an assessment as to whether or not it's complete or not, depending on what they're requesting. So when I see that the work that is under the particular item, and this is just phase one, which is from Station 13, which is roughly in front of the clubhouse, out to and including Cahoon Street. The work that's all covered there is all described in 30-odd different items. So it's not like when you get to the tail end of it, you shouldn't have enough, because each one of those items is increased by 50% also. They're asking for the reduction of the item itself, plus the percentage of that, which is part of the 50% total. When you get done, there still should be money left there, because we're not taking money out for something that isn't itemized. So I feel confident with what's happening.
And if that makes it easier to control it and, you know, keep a handle on things, that's fine. It just, in one particular situation, not that long ago, we got into the case of, you know, every meeting, we were handing the guy $100 so he could go pay a contractor, and that was getting a little crazy.
So long as the work is done. I mean, it takes an inspection. It takes going out there and checking it off against what they're requesting.
Because if they come up with a shortfall because they haven't completed the work, the burden falls on them.
It's not that, it's just that it seemed like it's,
I think it's a good way to do it.
yeah.
So long as,
If it's
so long
easier to
as,
control a project of that size this way, then fine.
so long as when an applicant comes before you and wants to have security in this form, so long as they itemize each particular piece of the construction and they establish a figure for it, that makes it a lot easier to control. If they simply give you a lump sum number for construction of Bay Point Drive, and they don't tell you how much is assigned to asphalt, they don't put anything in there that's assigned for drainage, you don't know how much money is being spent for what. But they have listed it all. And so that makes it much easier to take control over. And by having gone out there with the inspections, you know whether the work's complete or not. So, so long as the board, when it accepts the security, accepts a list, an itemized list for construction with a cost assigned to each item, it'll make it much easier for it to keep tabs on it, whether it's me going out there for inspection or someone else.
So a motion was made and seconded to release $26,584.50.
Yep.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so moved. Where'd we go? Master plan discussion.
What is this? We've talked about this individually. We talked about it last week. I put together a presentation. It's a short one. I'm going to try to go quickly. I would like to put this in front of the board tonight as food for thought and come back to this after this board has had an opportunity to digest it. I'm not saying I don't want any discussion tonight, but I'd really like you to hear what my proposal looks like, how I want to go forward, how I think it can help. Think about it over the next couple of weeks, and I'd like to ask George and Ken to put it on the agenda for further discussion at the next meeting. So, with that being said, this is a proposal for ownership, management, and utilization of the Wareham master plan. As everyone knows, we have a master plan now and it's not approved. So my agenda tonight is to talk about what is a master plan, what the contents are, why we should have one, who owns it and approves it, an update process proposal, how we utilize that master plan, and a Wareham Congress proposal, and then next steps. So let's talk about what is a master plan. It is a future vision and policy guide for the town. This is important. It's a policy guide. Oops, I don't know how I did that. I'm sorry. It is a long-range document, typically from 5 to 15 years. It is not a bylaw, a zoning bylaw, or a regulation. It is a dynamic and evolving document. So I want to go back again. It's a vision and policy guide. Now, the contents, and these are right out of Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81D. And I'll go through them quickly. A statement of goals and policies, but in the red are the 7 key areas that the master plan has to address per state law, and an implementation plan for each. Land use, housing, economic development, natural and cultural resources, open space and recreation, services and facilities, and circulation, which is really transportation facilities within the town. So why have a master plan? For me, the main reason for having a master plan is to ensure common goals and alignment within all Wareham agencies. Now, an agency is a board, a commission, an authority, whatever, all the different ones that we have, and I'll show you a diagram of that in a minute. We have a master plan so it provides guidance for future policy decisions and establish ownership and priorities for town initiatives. And a real side benefit is it promotes an open and democratic planning. Now, we have a master plan. It's been written, it's on a website, it's not in an approved state. A lot of questions have come up about who owns it, who approves it, town meeting, do they have to do it or not? If you go to the Mass General Laws, again, Chapter 41, Section 81D, it states very clearly, a planning board, I'm just going to read the red, shall make a master plan. This is the exact text, and it goes on to say that such plan shall be made, added to, changed from time to time by a majority vote of such planning board. We can do it here. This is right out of the laws. You can go look them up. We don't need a town meeting vote. Many towns do present it at town meeting and ask for adoption of it. I'm not sure what that buys you and I really don't know what happens if they vote no, because it doesn't mean anything according to Mass General Law. So, if we have a master plan, and if we have a process to approve it, it's important that we have a process to change it and to update it, keep it current. So I've come up with my own ideas on how that needs to happen, because just by approving a plan without having a way to change it and tune it to where we need to do doesn't make sense. So we need to identify, one, the source of changes, and I think they should be a planning board member, another Wareham agency, the director of planning, the town administrator, or a Wareham citizen petition. Basically anybody. And the way they do that is they present it to this board. They present a summary of the change, the motivation for that change, why they want to do it, what their expected outcome is of this change, what it's going to do for the town, what their implementation expectations are, how fast will this get going to place, what are they going to need, what are we going to need for resources to implement it. And then finally a proposed text for that entire update and change that could be pasted into the master plan. Now, what does the planning board do with that? Well, we have some options. We could approve it, or we could reject it right then and there. We could ask for we could make a direct request at that time for modifications, and based on the response to that, we could approve and reject it. Or we could solicit additional input. We could we could ask for that input to come from the town administrator, the director of planning, another Wareham agency, or a public hearing, or any or all of those things. and then represent with modifications if there are any, and again, approve and reject. I think it's a robust process that would allow anyone, a vehicle to come change or propose changes to a master plan, a vehicle here at the planning board to listen to those, a vehicle to solicit other input and understand the impact of it, and then make a decision. Now, how do we use this master plan? It should be the master planning document for all town agencies, and it's a tool that we use to ensure that all the agency charters and next level plans are in alignment. And I went onto the town website and I just started looking for plans. And this is just, I'm just scratching the surface, but vision plans, land use plans, economic development strategy plans, community preservation, open space, capital, housing, town budget, town policies. These need to align. They don't align today. I guarantee you they don't align. I've looked them up and they don't. So how do we do this? We use this as a roadmap for all town agencies. Now, there are a ton of agencies. I don't have them all here. But all of these agencies here, Sewer Commission, Veterans Council, Board of Health, Council on Aging, pick one, should all drive off that master plan. I've put Redevelopment Authority, Board of Selectmen, Conservation Commission, Finance Committee, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Planning Board on that inner circle, and I've highlighted the Planning Board as the owner of it. With that all in place, we can start the Wareham Congress. This is a proposal. Mark talked about this at our last meeting. This would be a forum for all Wareham agencies, chaired by the Planning Board. Be a quarterly meeting, public meeting under open meeting law guidance. The primary objective, again, to ensure agency alignment to the current master plan. So what would that agenda look like? I think it would be master plan alignment, initiative ownership. If you go through the initiatives in our master plan, it has recommended ownerships of them. Sometimes it's multiple boards or agencies that are identified, but we need to get people to sign up. If we're going to have a strategy, we're going to have a goal, we need to have an owner for it. And then there's a lot of them in there. There's probably 50 or 60 different initiatives, and we need to prioritize them. Can't do them all. We can't do 2 or 3 at a time. I mean, what I should say is 2 or 3 at a time is about all we can handle right now, is what I meant. And then we should report on implementation status. And I think if we go through something like this with the other agencies, we're going to find where our problems are, our disconnects, and we can get things realigned again. It's not going to be that hard. And finally, master plan updates. Again, agencies or people or citizens commissions or the town administrator coming in and saying, I'd like to propose this change to the master plan. So from a next step point of view, I'm asking that this planning board consider this, think about it, review, let's come back at a future meeting and discuss more, hear comments about this ownership by this board. I think that's the message right now tonight, is this board by state law owns this master plan and we need to take action to use it. And if we can agree that this is what we want to do or some modified version of this, then we can go ahead and go to master plan approval and a change process approval and get that change process posted so people know how to use it. At that point, we could proactively disseminate this master plan to all the Wareham agencies, show them where it is, what the initiatives are, and what the change process is for any issues they may have with it, and how they identify misalignments, and they want to stick with what their charter is, and they think the master plan needs to be updated. Then an invitation to all the Wareham agency chair people to a Congress implementation presentation. This would be a kickoff to get input on what their thoughts are, how it aligns with where they want to go, what the agenda should look like for this Congress, and how we make it most effective. So then there'd be review, comments, updates, and adoption at that point, and then we can initiate. Now, at this point, all I'm asking is number one, for this board to think about this, to be prepared to have one-on-ones with me or anybody else between now and the next meeting. I'd like to get a discussion and feedback at the next meeting. I have handouts for everybody so you can read it on paper if you like. I will send this out to everyone in PDF form so you can see it on your handheld or your home computer. That's all I have. Any quick, hard questions that need to be addressed right now?
I would just want to remind everybody that when you're doing interactions like that, not to violate the open meeting law. You know, you can't
Oh. Yeah,
Can't
we're going
communicate.
one-on-one, not two-on-one.
Can't, yeah, you can exchange information with Richard, but we can't make it a group.
So, to that point, just a couple of things here. First, this is the economic development strategy full report that I promised you last week that I did, that I forgot to bring. And this is the presentation I just gave.
Not in color. Not in color.
That cost me way too much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for that.
In the agenda, we do have a section for topics the chairman did not anticipate. We did get a request from Sheraton Home Builders. I don't know if you all have a copy in your packet. He's requesting a change in the building plan to a previously approved project. And I guess the question would be, do you consider this a minor modification, or?
Do you remember this?
That's basically what he's looking for, a determination whether this is minor or major in nature.
What project is it, George?
It's Spring Ave,
It's Spring Avenue.
multifamily units
Okay.
on Spring Ave.
Oh.
The original proposal that was approved by the planning board is the last page of the submittal.
What he's suggesting is removing the garages and making it a single level, everything on one floor structure.
And taking out the garage doors in the front.
So these elevations were from the original proposal?
The last page is from the proposal that was approved.
And he does,
Is there a s-
So he gets rid of all the second-story living space?
Correct.
So the
Drop the
third page is
overall
gonna be the new elevation, I take it, right? Front of
The third page would be what the facade looks like.
and it's keeping the same footprint.
Same footprint, yes.
And where are the cars parked?
That's a good question.
Where's your parking?
I'm sorry?
Where are the cars parked?
There's already a driveway in front of each unit as originally proposed on the site plan, and there is common area parking as well. Those are already approved and accepted by this board.
What's the driver behind this? The residents want to be on a single floor?
Yeah, just the age demographic. Single-story appeals to a older age demographic, and that's what I'm targeting, as opposed to having a second story.
Is that consistent with the neighborhood? We should-
It is.
I don't consider this a minor change.
This was, what was this approved as?
It was approved as a special permit planning for a multifamily,
It was approved last June.
5+ residential units.
How you feel about that, Mike?
It's not a
definitely
homeowners
big.
association, is there?
There would be a homeowners association as condos, because it'd be technically 8 units consisting of 4 duplexes,
So all 4 duplexes will be
single story.
single story. Are any of those already occupied?
No, this is all new construction. The land is vacant right now.
Mark, I know how you feel. I don't feel this is a minor modification. This is major. I would like to go back and look at it in more detail.
Is the site plan the earlier or the proposed?
The site plan that you guys currently
Very
have is
small,
what's, I know, I apologize. I had to put this together quick. The site plan you have is currently approved. I didn't change the footprint of the buildings that you already approved. All I literally did was remove the second story and remove the garage. Nothing about the footprint of the buildings changed.
So the garage space becomes living space?
It becomes
on the first
a
floor.
second bedroom, correct?
Charlie, did you have a question?
Just a comment, by removing the garages, you've reduced the parking to a single car per unit.
There is common area parking already approved.
There always was, though, and that was for overflow for people coming as a visitor. When you had the garage, at least you had a place for one car inside, one car outside. This way, you've essentially cut that in half. If the footprint hasn't changed, then probably the grading of the site and so forth doesn't change. But if the footprint of the building has changed, then it might warrant taking a look at it to make sure everything works. I can't tell without comparing the two.
Yeah, the footprint didn't change. I did
That
everything.
stayed the same?
Yeah, I did everything within the approved footprint.
So in the common area parking, if I can read this, there's six spots?
I believe there's 8.
2,
You
4,
sure that demographic's
6.
gonna
I
accept
only
not
see
having a
6.
garage? I think we went through this with Bay Point. Their study showed that they wanted that garage there.
For the price point that I'm gonna target, the square footage was more important than the garage. And I didn't want to change what the board had already approved with the footprint of the homes, so eliminating the garage and keeping and having the additional 300+ square feet of living space just made more sense financially.
Did
Because
the
I'd only be
total,
able to have 1 bedroom.
did the total bedroom space increase?
No, same number of bedrooms.
I'm sorry, I thought the garage, all right.
What was originally
Upstairs.
accepted was upstairs with bedrooms.
Yep, sorry.
I'm sorry, in order to evaluate it, we need to look at a more informative site plan.
Okay,
Can you provide that, please?
I can.
And to Charlie's point, I think understanding the parking, the new parking model is going to be critical.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm blind, I admit it, but I only see 6 common spots. And if you've got,
Yeah, I have no problem with coming back and bringing a full-size set plan for the board.
So we'll put you on the agenda for the 9th.
That'd be great.
Very good.
Who's your target market?
Seniors,
I
60.
don't think they'd want to have a garage with the snow.
Ideally, I would love to do a garage. It was just you guys had already approved the plan, so I was trying to essentially make it as easy as possible and not change the footprint of what you guys had already approved.
What were you considering the price point to be?
305 to 310.
It still sounds like a two-car family to me.
There is another similar layout with singles on one, seniors on one floor and everything, I think, without a garage, and I think it's been very successful. In fact, it's on a slab even, and they still seem to like it.
Yeah, these are gonna be full basements.
Truss roof?
Truss roof. If I was able to do the ranch design, it would be truss roof.
Very good. We'll see you at our next meeting, huh?
Thank you.
Thanks. I mixed up my paperwork. Is that everything?
That's everything.
There we go. You did have staff report stamped on something here, is that?
Yeah, I just wanted to alert the planning board that there'll be a proposed subdivision, A&R, of the Aldi supermarket complex, cutting out the AutoZone property. And with that, there'll be a question about the balance of open space and pervious surface, with the idea that potentially there's a shared responsibility for the open space, much like a homeowners association and or a commercial condo.
So Ken, they're gonna cut this up into 4 chunks?
2 chunks.
2, I see.
The two blue?
I see.
There's a red one, there's a blue one on the bottom where the mattress is.
And then a
You got
blue one
all
up
these,
our
you
right
got another
corner.
one with Burger King, or what's the hamburger joint?
Wendy's.
This way, actually,
And yeah, I'm seeing 3.
Two blues and one red.
You guys are getting slick, the prints are getting smaller and smaller, and you're putting more garbage in the smaller prints. You know, you got an older staff up here, you know, you got bad eyes.
Yeah, the existing parcels cut out the Wendy's and the Building D, I think is what it says.
Building D, which one is that?
The one on the bottom,
That's the mattress factory,
the
right?
small
blue
one. Yeah.
So
And what's the,
we'll have to see if
What's the
each,
reason?
each parcel
Meets zoning,
meets the criteria.
It's 10 pounds of shit in a 2-pound bag.
right.
Now they're gonna split it up.
Oblivious.
It won't meet your landscaping standards for between parcels.
Yeah, we want a 40-foot buffer.
Well, even if you had a 10, it wouldn't meet it.
You know, the whole system gets circumvented. When this came before us, it was 10 pounds in a 2-pound bag, and now they got everything in the same bag. Now they want to cut it up in separate pieces. You know, isn't that reverse the whole process, or
What is the
is it something we don't see?
yeah, what is the
Are they coming in
purpose of
front of
this?
us with the formal presentation in the near future?
Yes. And the red line will be what's proposed, with the green space over on the left being used to balance the requirements for zoning.
And help me understand, what's the motivation for this change, do you know?
To divest of the individual parcels of land so that the developer doesn't have that much responsibility. Doesn't own.
Should have thought of that earlier, shouldn't he?
It's very similar to doing a condo.
Divestiture?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we know what the proposed occupant for the existing building they're working on?
Forever life.
No,
No, so
I haven't been told anyway.
So you got vacant buildings scattered all over this thing.
Yeah. You got what, 3 vacant now and a 4th being built?
They still haven't occupied the one adjacent to the Aldi's.
Right. Or the 2
There's
Right.
2 next
to
to
the
all
left
this.
of the AutoZone.
Right.
Forever life.
And now
Ideal
they're
place
building
for 'em.
one more.
was trying to look at the HVAC that we're cutting into the one that's under construction right now. It almost looked like a little excessive, like a restaurant layout.
They want to keep their product cool.
Well, at some point, they need to tell us who these occupants are so that we can judge the parking situation here. The issue I have with this is, this vacant building that's adjacent to the AutoZone, what purpose is it gonna have? Because at one point, they came to us saying it might be a restaurant. You
When
know,
this went to ZBA, I think our recommendation was that it was overbuilt and to reduce the size. That recommendation was not acted on.
So this particular building here that's vacant ends up with what, 15 spots?
Let's not get ahead of it. This is just kind of a heads up. Let's let them get here and we can ask them then. Right?
That's right. This was just to alert that it's coming in.
We'll take it home and study it, George.
Get your crayons out.
Ken, the question would be, would it not, if it comes before this board as an A&R, whether or not the board should sign it as an A&R, knowing that there may be zoning violations by so doing? Is the board covered by putting that stipulation on the plan that you're saying you're not making any determination as to compliance with zoning? Does that cover it?
That should, it has up to this point.
It has up to this point because typically an A&R doesn't have a mixture of buildings and uses the way that this does, and overlapping parking and so forth, that now would be set right up at the lot line. But by doing this plan, would we not, or would you not we, I'm not a part of it, would you not be approving a plan that would be in violation of zoning?
We could.
Take that one step further, doing it as an A&R. Now, they got shared parking and all that stuff, or whatever. We can't restrict an A&R, or put any restrictions on an A&R.
That's the point. That is correct. But the assumption is when you do an A&R that you are doing it in conformance with zoning. I know that there have been issues before where there would be zoning violations, that you don't sign an A&R plan unless there has been a variance approved or something which would allow the planning board to then sign the plan and be in compliance with zoning.
Right.
So it's just a question I'm throwing out there right now because I don't have a clear answer on it.
Red light.
We can look into that when the,
Well,
And it comes
it's a
forward.
different twist, but generally, an A&R is frontage and area. But it's a different
oh,
twist.
frontage
where-
and
It is,
and road.
I can
It's a
remember,
difference that, you know, now you add the twist, you're creating non-conforming.
correct, I can remember from personal experience where I submitted an A&R plan to the planning board at one point, a number of years ago. And it involved obtaining a variance from the Board of Appeals to allow a less than required frontage on the lot before I could get the A&R signed. It had an existing building on it, it had
See,
some
again,
parking on
that's
it.
frontage. Now, you know, A&R procedure is very specific about frontage and area.
Yes,
Changing
you're
the
correct about that,
conformity
George.
is a different twist.
Yeah, you're correct. But I don't know how far you can go with that when you're endorsing a plan that, in effect, allows the plan to say that it violates zoning. I'm not fully clear on that myself.
It's a different aspect, yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna set a bad precedent. Well,
No, we're not.
oh, that's right, it's gonna go to Board of Appeals and they'll approve it anyway, so it don't make any difference. Entertain a motion to adjourn, George,
Yes, I would.
before I get myself into trouble here today.
You're right there.
Too late. The buzzer. I have a motion, is there a second?
Mike has non-conforming standing, he's been around.
All in favor?
Grandfather.
Meeting adjourned at 9:50.
Mr. Chairman,